Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your host, Samantha.
And that is right, everybody. We are back with a brand new episode. And I know it's late. It's actually the end of the month. And I mean, just as usual, my past couple episodes, we've been talking about how busy we are. Although this is the summertime for us, Samantha's on summer break. And as I mentioned to you guys in at least a couple of episodes already, I am going to be going back to school. And that's part of the reason why we've been so busy. I have actually been in the process of getting everything adjusted for school. With that, comes a lot of things for anybody who's, gone to school outside of, your hometown or whatever. It's it's very stressful and it demands a lot. And for that reason, we have been just all over the place. So that leads me to my next point here, where I think this is going to be a trend for us from now on. I'm probably going to upload an episode once a month rather than our every other week schedule, where usually it was like 2 episodes a month. But I mean, now that we got that out of the way, we got to say, hey, it's June, right? So happy Pride Month from the Calaveria podcast.
Happy Pride Month, guys.
And yeah, so I just want to take a moment just to say that, we stand with everybody, right? We stand in solidarity with everyone. We do not discriminate. And yeah, that's just who we are. And if you don't like that, you guys can leave.
Hope you guys had like a good Pride Month. I know we didn't get this out sooner, so hope your Pride Month went well. Hope you guys stayed safe. If you went out to Pride, hope it was a good time.
Yeah, and nonetheless, I mean, even though this is coming out later than we expected, happy Pride Month to everybody. And again, we support everyone. And I wanted to start talking about something else, right? I don't know about you, Samantha, but for me on TikTok specifically, I've been getting a lot of these type of TikToks that are like, okay, kind of like choose your journey type of things. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so.
Well, specifically with these, they are mainly like, okay, fall. It's fall already, or it's Halloween time. Choose your dream Halloween house, and it's like these different
Oh
variations,
yeah.
and those sorts of things, like dream Halloween town. And it's been getting so many lately, and just people just kind of like reminiscing about Halloween and how, for, I mean, we're going to be already at the end of June, early July. So what? It's only like 3 months away from us. So, like it's coming up. It's really coming up. But I mean, now that I started getting all these TikToks, I'm starting to think like, is spooky season upon us? Like, what's going on?
I think we're getting close to spooky season because to me, if it's fall, it's spooky season. So since, it's like we're in summer is like midsummer, I would say. And so people are getting prepared for fall and they're getting
There you
prepared for
go. I
spooky
guess it's
season.
the preseason to spooky season, right? And I mean, there's something I like to think, right? I mean, like if you like us, right? We're spooky all year long, so for us, we really don't got to get prepared for that. But it's nice to see that other people are like starting to like bring this around and seeing this more on TikTok. And I mean, hopefully, we get a lot more listeners from that. But with that being said, we are coming up on our first year anniversary, which is actually going to be on the 5th of July. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to go through with our plan. I know in the past I said that we wanted to try to do like a 1 year special sort of thing. And with everything coming up and just being how busy we are, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year at least. Or, I mean, at this time. But, we may end up doing something in the future. It might be like a late yearly special. But, you know, whatever the case is, be on the lookout for that. We'll be sure to announce that. But again, we're not going to have any sort of 1 year special for that. But nonetheless, I mean, hey, 1 year. It's doesn't seem like it's been a whole year. I mean, what about you, Samantha? Like, how do you feel about that?
It doesn't feel like it's been a whole year, but it also feels like it's been longer than that somehow. Like to me, it feels like a mix of both, you know?
Yeah, I know this was like it was more than like a year in the making for us. I know there was a lot of talks between me and you about I wanted to start something. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, there was a whole thing when I would constantly send you names for the podcast and logos and all this and that. And then fast forward to, our first episode, it felt like a dream, it didn't seem real. And here we are now, our 23rd episode, 1 year later. And I like to think that we got better at what we do now. And I mean, we have a world of things to get into. Like, if Samantha can attest, right? I have lots and lots and lots of things listed for the future for the podcast. And I mean, I think we'll be happy to share any of this stuff with you guys. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been listening to us thus far. Hopefully, we can grow more. And yeah, I mean, we're just happy to share everything with you guys.
Yeah, thank you to our supporters, our listeners. Even if you don't listen to every episode, we're just thankful for you guys to, just support us in any way.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys are the ones that help us keep going. I mean, I don't think we would have continued this if we only got like one listener. I mean, even then, we probably would, but I mean, it'd be very discouraging if we didn't have anybody listening to us. But we do have like a sort of fan base, albeit as small as it is. It doesn't matter. It's something that like keeps us motivated. We always talk about it all the time. Whenever we get people who follow us on Instagram or TikTok or whatever the case is, it's always exciting for us. To wrap that up, I mean, just thank you guys once again from the Calaveria podcast. Thank you for 1 year of letting us share stories with you guys. And on that note, we want to go ahead and get into today's episode. So we have two brand new cases for you guys, and that's going to be haunted hotels.
To start us off, I'm going to be talking about, I want to say, one of the more famous haunted hotels you might have heard of. If you've never heard of the famous Stanley Hotel, you definitely heard of the well-known book that was inspired by this place. That book being The Shining by Stephen King. Before diving into that though, let's get into the history. The Stanley Hotel was first opened up back in June 22, 1909. So that's roughly how many years ago?
Almost. That's over 100 years.
So this place, obviously, old. A lot of history here. Obviously, with history comes what we say, like spirits and stuff like that. Just because of the many stories that could be found throughout this place, With over 100 years, something's bound to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And it was built by F.O. Stanley, the inventor of the Stanley Steamobile. That was actually one of the many ways that guests would come to this resort and this hotel is through the Steamobile back in when it first launched. And he didn't stop there though. He's a big innovator. He made this hotel and everything like that. But he kind of built the town surrounding the Stanley Hotel from the ground up. He started its first bank. He started its first water company, everything. He had his own power plant for the hotel, basically, that would also supply power to the neighboring towns and stuff like that. When I was researching this guy and anything like that, I noticed a lot of things were named Stanley, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Maybe he's just kind of stroking his ego. Good for him, he was doing things.
Yeah, it does seem like it.
Actually, he wasn't the one that chose the name for the hotel. It was the people from the town that he helped, basically, that were telling him no, name it after yourself, name it the Stanley Hotel. And he was I guess. And so that's where the hotel gets its name from the people from the town just telling him just name it after yourself, you've helped us so much, you deserve it.
And so they were grateful and they wanted something to kind of commemorate that apart from all the other things named Stanley.
Exactly. He would actually use his power plant to advertise to tourists oh, this is the first establishment to ever use electricity for heating, lighting, and even cooking meals, all just exclusively through electricity. And you have to think, back in the 1909, people were oh, what the heck? Electricity!
Oh yeah, that was the bee's knees right there, right? I don't have to the whole classic thing, right? I think of a Christmas Tale when he's just walking around with this little nightcap and the little ball hanging out with this little kerosene lamp just walking through.
Exactly. So, people were hearing that and they're whoa, that's crazy over there. We gotta go see that. And in its first years, the hotel was very successful and, tourists were coming, people were excited to go. How expensive was this hotel, you may be wondering? Unlike other hotels in the area and similar to this one, it was actually pretty expensive, and you may be wondering, well, what are the prices? I'm talking $5 to $8 a night. I know, pretty pricey, right?
Yeah, but I think you have to take into account early 1900s. Do you know how much that would be today?
I actually don't, but when comparing this to similar hotels in the area, They were charging $1 to $2 a night, and this place is charging $5 to $8. Like, you had to have like pretty big money to be going here and staying a couple nights. I'm pretty sure $5 to $8. A lot of people didn't have that to spare as much. It was, inflation. If we look back on that, I'm not sure how much that would exactly cost, but I'm sure it was kind of like, if you're going to the Stanley Hotel, you're going to the Stanley Hotel for a nice time.
Yeah, and actually, I just went ahead and I searched it up right now. $5 in 1908. So you said this opened up in 1909. I mean, just a year shy. I don't think there'd be too much of a difference. But today, that $5 would be $165. And that's actually a lot of money. I mean, I know it seems like a nice hotel. You're paying upwards of like, $200 or more. So I would imagine $8 would be closer to that 200 mark. So, I mean, yeah, it sounds like, you're paying a pretty penny to stay there.
Exactly. He also had to include everyone's favorite essential, a golf course. So you could enjoy golf here. You could go to the casino, which didn't have any gambling, but it did have like, shows and like music and such like that. Yeah. I don't know why they call it a casino, but I mean...
Yeah,
I don't know.
For all we know, we're pretty young. So for all we know, casinos back in the day were another thing when now we just attribute it to like Vegas and just lots of slot machines and stuff. But I mean, yeah, that is kind of weird. That is kind of weird to think about.
That's true. But yeah, so, if you're coming here, people are having a good time. They're able to do multiple activities. So I guess that $5 to $8 was worth it because business was booming. Now, throughout the years, like there was up and down, post-war stuff, like they kind of had to like change a bit to accommodate to like the post-war like tourism kind of stuff that was going on, but business wasn't booming as much. It wasn't actually until the infamous book The Shining that tourism actually started to get back up there. People were coming back. They were interested on this famous hotel that The Shining was based off of. Let me tell you the story about how Stephen King got the idea to create this book. In 1974, after staying in the hotel with his wife, they were actually the only two people in the whole entire hotel staying there. They were going to close down the hotel for the rest of the year, basically.
No, that'd be creepy already.
Business, as I said, was not booming. So when they were going through like the bar, the concert hall, and everything like that, they were the only ones there. And you could imagine how kind of like creepy it must have been. Kind of just how they felt, just being the only two guests here, having a night away from their kids. And they stayed in the room 217. Now let's go on to the sole reason why King was inspired to write The Shining. During the night when King was sleeping, he had a nightmare of his son, who was being chased with a fire hose down the corridors of the Stanley Hotel. And it was this experience that would catalyze King's decision to like write The Shining and everything that would go on. When we look at the similarities between the night that King stayed and also just the story of The Shining, we see basically two people alone in the hotel, King and his wife, and then also a family alone in a hotel. That's kind of like a parallel we see in the story. Another parallel in the story is that Jack had to deal with alcoholism, and a lot of the people that, look into like the case of The Shining and like the Stanley Hotel, and they look for other ways that the Stanley Hotel inspired King's book. They attribute Jack's alcoholism to F.O. Stanley's very own alcoholism. He had a distaste for alcohol in general, which is very interesting, as later on I explain places where people say F.O. Stanley is said to haunt the location. But yeah, people just see these parallels and they're like, it's pretty obvious that the Stanley Hotel is a major influence to King's book. Not only just because of this nightmare, but also like with the whole history on it. But enough about all that. After The Shining's success, the hotel began to see more and more tourists, and with more tourists came more chilling stories of this infamous haunted hotel. And with that, we move on to the paranormal stuff. If you know about the Stanley Hotel and its well-known spirits, you most likely know and have heard of its infamous chambermaid ghost, her name being Elizabeth Wilson. Her story starts back in 1911 after a flood had taken out power in the hotel. F.O. Stanley reportedly added a gas lamp into each room, and in one of those rooms, which just so happened to be 217, a gas leak occurred. Sadly, Wilson entered this room with a lit candle, and it would set off an explosion that would explode like 10% of the whole entire hotel.
Damn.
Yeah, this is a pretty massive explosion. And, many people report people obviously having to have died, being injured. But surprisingly, Elizabeth Wilson, she fell from the second floor to the first floor into the dining hall. But she didn't die from this. She actually just fell into a coma. And after waking up from this coma, she continued to work at the hotel up until 1950. And you may be wondering, well, if she didn't die here, how is she haunting the place? Or why is she still here? Well, many guests and workers report seeing her in this room where this infamous explosion happened and everything like that. And one of the main things that people report seeing her do, or that she does, is that while they're asleep at night, they wake up to their room being tidier and their clothes being packed away into their suitcases neatly. And so imagine you're just sleeping, you wake up, and then your clothes is put away, the towels are away, everything that you used that night is put away neatly.
See, that kind of reminds me of La Planchada for some reason, where she kind of helps the people out, when they're sick. So it was another friendly spirit in a sense, right? Even though she has such a sad story in this case. I mean, this woman was she had a tragic accident, although she didn't necessarily die from it. She was still there, and then she's there to help people. She wasn't there for revenge, oh no, you're gonna suffer the same fate as me.
She isn't seen as a malicious spirit or anything like that, but I guess she's actually one of the nicer spirits that people report seeing or having experience with in the Stanley Hotel. As I was saying, she tightens up the room and everything. One couple even reported their bed being made while they were still sleeping in it. So they woke up to the sheets all nicely tucked in, and they were inside of it. So imagine you're waking up and you're just tightly wrapped up in this blanket, and it's just tucked in nicely and everything all perfect, but you're sleeping inside of it.
Yeah, I would freak out. Who's trying to trap me in the bed?
That's crazy. That's scary to me too, because I can't imagine dang, I didn't wake up when this person was tucking me in like that.
That's weird. I don't know, I don't even know what I would do, honestly, in that moment. Obviously, I'd be, freaking out. First reaction would be, did the housekeepers come in, right? Did, the, room service, not the room service, but I guess, yeah, the housekeepers, did they come in and, tuck me in while I was sleeping?
Exactly. That's just so, it's just so weird. No, you wouldn't get an experience like that anywhere else, I feel like. And I don't think the housekeepers would come in and tuck you in. Not even tuck you in. It's one thing to be tucked in. It's another thing for the bed to be made as if you aren't there, basically. But you're still inside of the bed, which is crazy. Now, while Elizabeth Wilson is said to be one of the nicer ghosts of the Stanley Hotel, there's actually a more malicious spirit seen in 217. This is for unmarried couples, though. If you aren't married, I wouldn't recommend sleeping in this room, because couples have reported feeling a chilling presence in their bed with them as they sleep. And to me, when I was reading this, I was just is it sleeping in between them? What's going on? And it's no, you can't sleep. You guys aren't married. And I thought that was kind of weird that while you're trying to sleep with your girlfriend or your partner, anyone, and you guys aren't married, you just feel someone there sleeping in the bed with you guys. That's just so weird and creepy.
That is weird. That would make me run out of there in an instant.
Me too. It's unknown if this ghost, if people say it's Wilson as well, or if it's just another spirit that was injured in the explosion and was killed off by it. But hey, I wouldn't recommend sleeping here if you're gonna be sleeping with someone and you guys aren't married. Personally, I don't want to share a bed with a ghost. That's just me personally. Similar to Elizabeth Wilson, many guests and workers say that F.O. Stanley himself can be seen haunting the hotel. Typically, he's seen in the hotel's bar and billiard room, which I thought was pretty interesting because it said that like in his years since he dealt with alcoholism, he kind of had like a distaste for alcohol at some point. And so I thought it was pretty interesting that like he was like seen in the hotel bar where drinks can be found. But hey, that's where he is and that's where he's hanging out. His wife Flora, though, has also been reported in the hotel's concert hall playing the piano, which I think is pretty like that's kind of creepy. So while they didn't die in the Stanley Hotel, they are reported to be seen there. People have reported encounters with them, and yeah. Other small spirits that many have encountered was that of a small child who enjoys wandering the property and messing with guest hair. So while you're just chilling, imagine just a little kid just like touching your hair and just like flicking it around, pulling your hair. That's like often like an experience people have while they're getting ghost tours on the Stanley Hotel, while they're just eating in the Stanley Hotel, just chilling there.
Yeah, see, like I think that's one of those things where like it kind of crosses the line for me. Like I could do, with maybe seeing something or having a weird feeling, cold spots, those sort of things. But when it comes to like touching me, that's like a whole different thing. Like that's just crossing the line, That takes it like a whole nother level. And I don't want to be on that level.
Me either. This isn't the only child ghost, though, as the fourth floor of the hotel is said to have many accounts of guests hearing children's laughter when no one else was around. And to me, that's weird. I would not want to stay. As soon as I heard like a little hee 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 from like a little girl, I'm like, gotta go.
Yeah. See, children, they could be, adorable or whatever, but, when it's a child and you're the only person in the hotel and there's no one supposed to be there, yeah, that's weird. That's a different story.
It really is. I think interesting enough is that, there's children ghosts, there's adult ghosts, but there's also a ghost of a dog known to be haunting the Stanley Hotel.
Wow, okay.
This is attributed to the fact that there's actually a pet cemetery on the hotel's ground, usually
oh my gosh,
housing the past owners like pets and everything. And specifically, Cassie, a golden retriever, is said to haunt the Stanley Hotel. And I don't know if it's a she, he, I don't know. They didn't say exactly, but Cassie is said to deliver newspaper to the staff and scratch at doors to be let inside, despite being buried in the cemetery. So
that's scary. See, I wonder if that inspired him, like if that was always a thing, and if that inspired him when he was there, like to make Pet Cemetery like later on in the future.
I'm not sure. I didn't see anything talking about Pet Cemetery when I was looking up like the inspiration, for The Shining. No mention of the Pet Cemetery, so that's interesting. I'd have to see like when he wrote that and when he had visited the hotel.
Yeah, I'm actually searching that up right now, so if you want to just continue, I'll let you know right now.
Okay. Not only is there a pet cemetery, but there's also an underground cave system that was once used by workers for the Stanley during a time when it was kind of deemed unprofessional for guests to see the workers. I'm not sure why, but back then I guess it was weird to see workers, and it's like rude for people while they're staying at a hotel. And these caves,
tell me it was one of those. Yeah, it sounds like it was one of those places.
These caves are believed to be haunted by one of the hotel's past pastry chefs, as it is said to randomly smell of delectable sweet treats that cannot be explained. And honestly, I would like to smell the sweet treats. I wouldn't mind if a pastry chef haunted my place. I'm like, if it smells.
You wake up in your room with a nice little treat on the counter when you wake up.
Yes. Waking up, you go to your kitchen and there's just a little croissant. You're like, hell yeah.
Something, a little something. That doesn't sound too bad.
Exactly.
And actually, I just searched it up right now. So it looks like The Shining came out in 1980, at least the film. And then Pet Sematary didn't come out until 1989. So, I mean, I would assume that's probably similar with the actual books. So, I mean, that'd be interesting to see if that actually did inspire him. But, I mean, nonetheless, that's... I've never really heard of a Pet Cemetery, so that's cool. It's a cool little, I guess, factoid, and then, I mean, haunted dog, too. I mean, that's crazy.
Now I'm going to discuss some of the more famous haunted rooms of the Stanley Hotel. Room 401 is said to be the creepiest of all rooms, especially for women who stay the night, as the room is haunted by an unpleasant male ghost. Many women who stay the night in this room have reported being touched inappropriately when standing in the closet of the room. And when I read this, I wasn't sure if it's like a walk-in closet or what, because it's like, oh, why are you standing in the closet?
Yeah, it
like,
sounds like it would have to be something like that, or at least maybe standing in front of it. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
I wouldn't recommend staying in 401 if you're alone and you're, a woman. It's kind of scary.
Even see, that's another thing. The whole touching thing. It's one thing to touch your hair, or tug you, whatever, but touching you inappropriately too. Like, it's one thing when a living human being does it, but then a spirit, you can't do anything about it. You really can't do anything about it because, you can't see them. So that just is a whole nother like level of violation.
Adds like a whole nother creep factor and just unsettlingness.
Yeah, that is definitely scary.
Now, down the hall in room 407, many guests have reported, while they were sleeping, being forcibly tucked into their bed. It kind of makes me think of back to Elizabeth Wilson and that one couple, but this time they said while they're going to bed, they felt as if someone was forcibly tucking them in, get in bed right now. And
oh, no, that's weird too.
Yeah, it is weird. And obviously, they aren't seeing this person, they aren't seeing the force pushing them down. It's just a random feeling of where they're being forced into bed. At other times, instead of forcing them into bed, they felt someone sit at the foot of their bed. And when they go to turn on the light to see who's standing or who's sitting there, all they see is an indentation in the sheets where that person was sitting, but no one was there. Even further down the hall in room 428, guests have reported seeing a cowboy stand at their foot of the bed or in the corner while watching them sleep. And to me, that's creepy. Just having someone stand there, watch you sleep, and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, see, that's always been a fear of mine to wake up in the middle of the night and just look and something's in the corner.
And especially since at the foot of my bed, I think I would not know what to do. But in the corner, I feel to me that's creepier. I don't know why. It's just so the idea of someone watching you sleep. In room 4118, ghost children are said to mischievously do things in this room. Covers are removed during the night, and hangers are known to move on their own. The bathroom light is also reportedly turned on and off throughout the night. There's a story of a little girl about 4 years old and her mother that stayed there a few years ago, and the following morning, the girl reported that a little boy kept tickling her throughout the night. She wasn't afraid, and instead she kind of just told the little boy, stop it, leave me alone, stop tickling me. And he did. But imagine you're this girl's mom, and she tells you this boy was tickling me in the night, this little kid was tickling me. He wouldn't leave me alone. I would be what are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm show me this little boy right now.
Yeah, I would be so scared. I'd be what do you mean in the night? How come you didn't wake me up? What happened? Who? How did he look? Oh my, that's just so scary to think of. Your daughter, your 4-year-old daughter, is telling you this little boy was in your room playing with her, kind of messing with her. On the 3rd floor, though, in room 302, a male ghost has been seen in the shadows of this room, walking near the walls. In the famous show Ghost Hunters, this room was even showcased, and in it, a table was seen levitating while they were changing film and just changing their equipment out. And to me, that's crazy. I don't remember seeing this episode because we used to watch Ghost Hunters, and I feel I would have remembered.
Yeah, I'm sure we could probably find that somewhere on on the internet, if not on YouTube. But that is crazy to have something like that, prominent, caught on camera.
It isn't only just the rooms that are haunted, though. The concert hall is also said to be haunted by a worker named Paul, whose responsibility was to instruct the 11 p.m. curfew. And in the concert hall, it is said if you're caught in the room after hours, many have reported hearing Paul tell them to get out. As I said earlier, though, Stanley's wife Flora also haunts the hotel's piano in the concert hall. She's oftentimes heard playing the piano at odd hours, and Paul doesn't dare to tell her to get out. Actually, I have a small story for you guys and a photo that I did send to you that was taken inside the concert hall, and I think it's pretty creepy. But I'll go ahead and read this person's account. We'll also share that photo with you guys on our Instagram, so feel free to check that out. But I'll go ahead and read that for you guys. Over the weekend, about 15 coworkers and myself had our company trip to the Stanley Hotel and Estes Park, known for being Stephen King's inspiration for The Shining. We took an 8 p.m. ghost tour, where we joined about 15 other people to get guided around the property and told stories about its history and creepy things that are said to have happened. We were told to take lots of pictures, I'm sure to try and capture orbs or ghosts. Many green orbs were caught in pictures, but I don't think anything is as creepy as this photo taken by my coworker. A little girl in a hot pink dress who was definitely not on our tour. And apparently years ago, a young girl, 12 to 13, by the name of Lucy, was squatting in the basement of the concert hall, which is seen in the photo that was taken. She was forced to leave. The night got below freezing and she froze to death. Everyone on my tour has vouched that the girl was not on our tour. Who wouldn't remember someone wearing hot pink? The man pictured is our tour guide. No one would have been in front of him. I am convinced this is the ghost of Lucy. Just one more added note, though I doubt if anyone would believe me, but there was only one time throughout the tour where I felt any strange energy or feeling, and it was right here, heading down to the basement of the concert hall. And yeah, if you pull up that photo, you'll see in the corner and the left-hand corner of the guy, next to the guy, you can see a little girl kind of crouching down, and she is wearing hot pink.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the picture now, and that's really the first thing that kind of stands out to me, because there is such a big contrast with everything. It's just lots of white. The person, what you assume it's a man, right next to it, where they said the tour guide is wearing all black. So that pink definitely stands out. And honestly, I kind of thought it was a little mannequin or a doll or something. And I mean, as we do with all these stories, right, you just got to take them at face value. We don't really have any other things to corroborate it. But it is weird if that's true, that whole story about this little girl kind of freezing to death in this hot pink dress. It's very weird. And I want to believe it, because when they say they encourage them to take pictures everywhere, that was my initial thing where I spoke previously about going to a haunted mission. Remember when we didn't know it was haunted initially until we just thought randomly hey, what if this place is haunted? And when we searched it up, it turned out to be one of the top 10 most haunted missions in all of California. So at that moment, I told myself, you know what, I'm gonna start taking pictures everywhere. Go look back at them later, and then see if I caught something. So in a sense, I believe it. I don't think it's weird that they would go on to do that, which I guess kind of explains why it is pretty blurry, pretty hazy, but nonetheless, it is creepy if this is true.
It definitely is. And I have some other further information on Lucy, and just kind of what her spirit does in the concert hall. She's said to tamper with lights, and also just kind of mess with people a little bit. She's seen actively communicating with staff and parapsychologists via flashlights. How they'll say oh, flicker the light if it's a yes or no. They say she oftentimes will do that. And her story and her pre-death connection to the Stanley is kind of unclear. People say she froze to death in that little story, but it's kind of it's not very clear on how she died, but it is known that she did die, near the concert hall. Some people say she's actually just a runaway or a homeless woman who found refuge there, and that's also another story. Whatever her history, employees insist that Lucy's presence is very welcoming, and I guess she hums because in it, people say her humming often lightens the energy and mood wherever she lingers.
I don't care if it was the ghost of an adorable little baby. That is not that would not brighten up my mood anytime if I heard random humming.
That's what I was thinking. To me, any humming from any source I cannot see or recognize, I'm instantly just scared. I'm not, and my energy isn't lightened. The mood isn't lightened at all.
Yeah, I'm not oh my god, what a sweet little girl. No.
But yeah, that's all. That's most of the hauntings at the Stanley Hotel. There's other rooms where like the hotel kind of like buys into like the hauntedness, and like they create like, not that they create, but like they say like, oh, this room is haunted by specifically this spirit that guests have experiences with. And I do want to talk about that a bit. Like this hotel, I feel like oftentimes, like, since it's such like a well-known and established haunted hotel, they kind of tend to like buy into it a bit. And so when you go here, they have haunted ghost tours. They have these ghost tours that people who have gone say like, oh yeah, like I experienced this, I see this, like, oh, when we were there, we heard knocks on the window. It was 3 a.m. and we're getting a ghost tour in the concert hall, and we heard the humming. And as much as I want to believe people, and I want to believe like the guests there, even the workers who have had accounts and experiences and fully believe that the hotel is haunted, I can't help but think like, I'm sure like some of these experiences are kind of just like the staff and like also like the owner kind of buying into like this whole haunted ordeal.
Yeah, I think when it comes to these very like famous like haunted sites and stuff like that, I think you have to take things kind of like with a grain of salt, because I feel like if you go into it with that mindset of like, oh my god, I'm so scared right now, I'm gonna find something, like any little thing, you're gonna overanalyze it and you're gonna attribute it to being something, paranormal. Which is why I feel like it's very authentic when you have, these sightings when things, were, I guess, first occurring, where, it wasn't well known as being a haunted hotel and those sort of things. And I mean, it's the nature of the things, right? I mean, we make it famous. We're talking about it right now. There's a reason why we're talking about it and why it's so well known. I'm sure these things do happen, but with anything like this, you always have to kind of think like, okay, well, was it really something, or are you just looking for something?
Exactly. That's why I was pretty happy to find a story where they actually had like a photo of like the actual thing that happened. Like, sure, they didn't see like the little girl with them or anything like that, but they have like photo evidence. Like, I don't think the staff is gonna just randomly have like a little girl statue right there just to trick people and be like, oh no, I wasn't there. I wasn't there. What are you talking about? Like, I feel like it's like a bit more like, if they are faking that, it's kind of going the extra mile, in my opinion. But I don't think they would. And the fact that other guests that were there with them also say like, no, I didn't see anything like that, I didn't see any girl like that. To me, that story, like, it has a little bit more weight than just people saying like, oh yeah, when I was staying the night, I heard 3 taps on my window, or I heard scratching on my door, it was the ghost dog, or something like that. And I feel like that could be a bit more just kind of like the hotel buying into the idea of it being haunted.
Yeah, I mean, nonetheless, though, I mean, a lot of these things, like, it's hard to explain them, especially when you have stuff. I think it's one thing on a tour, you experience something, okay, cool. We like to think that obviously there wouldn't be just trying to play tricks on you, try to get you to believe it's haunted by forcing things on you. But, like, if you're experiencing stuff in the privacy of, like, a hotel room or something like that, then it gets, like, a little bit more serious because, you tend to think, like, no one's going to sneak into the room. I'm not going to just miss a whole ass human being right here in front of me or doing stuff to me. Those things are, kind of make you think like, well, is there something really going on here? Or how can you, explain something physically touching you away? Like, how are you going to just get rid of that?
Yeah, how are you going to explain someone sitting at the foot of your bed when no one's there? But yeah, that is the Stanley Hotel, and I hope you guys enjoyed all the stories, all the little spooky haunts, and even the history of it.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, I don't know, I don't know if this is controversial for me to say, but I mean, I've heard of the Stanley Hotel and I've heard of The Shining. Obviously, like, it's a very famous book and a very famous movie, but I don't remember if I've ever seen The Shining like entirely. Like, I know I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I don't know if I've actually seen the entire movie.
I think I've almost seen the entire movie. I think at one point I was watching it in parts, but I never finished like the very last end. And I know the most famous like version of the Shining interpretation, like Stephen King says like, oh no, he does like, that's not my vision, and he ended up doing like his own thing called like Stephen King's The Shining, that which is like kind of like a series, like a show kind of, that is more actually like his
What
idea
he
of, yeah,
intended.
what he intended and envisioned. And so I guess if you were to watch that, that that actually has clips of the outside of the Stanley Hotel. The more famous like movie doesn't have any clips because they chose to use another place that was kind of like cheaper to use, and like they wouldn't really have to like go through all like the paperwork and everything like that. And so if you want to look for, that series that Stephen King actually directed and like helped shoot, it actually has photos of the outside, not photos, videos of the outside, and also even the interior of the Stanley Hotel used in it.
No, well, that's good to know. I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
And with that, I want to thank my sources. Thank you to the Stanley Hotel by historycolorado.org, the Stanley Hotel by Colorado Encyclopedia.org. Zooming into the Stanley Hotel, Stephen King's inspiration for The Shining by Iona Naam on fancypantshome.com. The Stanley Hotel's Haunted History by Patrick McGuire on uncovercolorado.com. And 17 unsettling staff and guest stories of hauntings at the hotel The Shining is based on by Chrissy Stockton on thoughtcatalog.com.
All right. And again, I mean, that was very interesting. And I mean, one of the most well known haunted hotels in the US, if not, the world. Well, I guess, it's my turn now, right? And today I will be covering a case that has always stuck with me for as long as I can remember, as long as I've, heard about it. This is a special case because it not only incorporates aspects of the paranormal, but of true crime as well, which I believe is a first for the show, and that is the case of Murder Castle. We begin on May 16th, 1861, with the birth of a baby boy by the name of Herman Webster Mudgett, born into an affluent family in Gilmanton, New Hampshire. Young Herman was subject to both physical and mental abuse from both of his parents, but suffered the worst at the hands of his father. He would be forced into long periods of isolation, food deprivation, and a strange form of silencing, which involved a piece of cloth being soaked in kerosene and placed over his mouth. Herman would find his escape from this abuse in the nearby woods near his home. At this point in his life, Herman began to show signs of high intelligence, which culminated in a newfound interest in medicine. This new interest would be expressed in the most bizarre way possible. It was said that when he would escape to the woods, he would trap animals in order to dissect them and perform surgery. And just so you all know, that surgery with air quotes. And even more disturbing, some accounts claim that he was responsible for the death of a childhood friend at the age of 11. An older kid by the name of Tom was known to be one of Herman's few friends. And one day, while exploring an abandoned home together, tragedy struck when Tom fell from a landing, ultimately leading to his death. At least that's what Herman claims. There are those out there that believe that Herman was actually close enough to push Tom off of the landing and ultimately to his death. Many would argue that his time in the woods led to a sort of fascination with anatomy and later human anatomy, and as such, he decided to pursue a career in medicine. As a young adult, Herman enrolled at the University of Michigan Medical School, where by some accounts, he was regarded as a mediocre student. It was at this point in his life that his true colors began to show. Herman was known to be a womanizer, serial liar, swindler, fraudster, and even a thief. And it is believed that he used his charm and good looks to use one woman's money to pay for his tuition. He would go on to use many other women throughout his early adulthood, at one point even having 3 different wives. And if this is any indication as to the type of person that he was becoming, it only gets worse. While in medical school, Herman stole literal corpses in order to use them in fraudulent insurance claims.
What the heck?
Yeah, and I mean, trust me, when I said it only gets worse, it only gets worse. They may have also been used for his own entertainment, subjecting them to his twisted curiosity. And you know what? You guys can use your own imagination for that, right? I don't want to get too descriptive on here, but he was known for trapping animals to dissect them, so, can only imagine what he was doing to these corpses. Eventually, in 1884, he would graduate from medical school and move to Chicago the following year, where he began work as a pharmacist under his new alias, Dr. Henry H. Holmes, or as many have come to know him as today, H.H. Holmes. In a new city as a new man, Holmes sort of reinvented himself. By all accounts, he was a harder worker and proved himself as a pharmacist, eventually going on to purchase the very pharmacy he worked at. Soon after coming into ownership of the pharmacy in 1887, Holmes purchased a vacant lot across the street. He began to authorize construction of a 2-story multi-use building. Now, if there's one thing we've learned about him thus far, it's that everything is not what it seems. And this little endeavor was no exception. How, you may ask? Well, Holmes would contract one construction crew 1 second and then turn around and fire them the next, repeating this cycle over and over again. Being the froster that he was, he did this to get out of ever having to pay for any work done on his building, claiming poor craftsmanship. It has even been alleged that he got away with the construction without ever having to pay a cent. Once completed in 1891, the building was home to a new drugstore, retail shops, and it even offered patrons lodging on the second floor. Holmes' new project was soon dubbed the Castle due to its size. Ads would soon appear in the local paper with job openings for young women in the area, as well as advertising the newly constructed living quarters. And oddly enough, or not so much considering what we know about him, he even ran ads claiming to be a rich man looking for a wife. And if it couldn't get any weirder, all of his employees, fiancés, wives, and even some of his guests were required to have life insurance policies with H.H. Holmes himself listed as the sole beneficiary. And you see, I think we all know by now that this guy is clearly not a good person, right?
He obviously only cares about money, himself, and whatever he wants to do with those animals and corpses, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know I didn't add this in here, but in my research, this guy was using women like toys, basically, like a child with toys. Like, he'd pick one up and use them for whatever he wanted. Mainly, it was for financial gain. He was known to go after like very wealthy women, use their money, use their family's money, and then kind of marry another woman at the same time. So, like I said, while he was in medical school, he was married to 3 different women at once. This continued, and I mean, he ran ads. When he ran that ad saying that he was a wealthy man looking for a wife, it was said that he was actually still married at that point. So he clearly didn't care. He didn't give a shit about anything. He just wanted money and basically to be able to do whatever he wanted. I mean, he's a serial liar, a womanizer who used and abused women emotionally and financially, committed countless acts of fraud, and is even a suspected murderer. And I know that these people in this new city would have no way of ever knowing any of this, but when the building manager, your boss, fiance, or husband makes it a point to make sure that you not only take out a life insurance policy, but to list him as a sole beneficiary, I feel like it doesn't take a genius to smell something fishy there.
I feel like if it's your husband, maybe but as your boss, to me, that's just. But I guess this man was very convincing. Obviously, he was tricking a bunch of people. He was doing something to trick these people. That's for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I get it if it's your partner or your spouse, whatever. Okay, it's understandable. It's kind of weird though, as much as we can play that off for someone to kind of just tell you hey, Samantha, we're gonna get married. You're gonna get a life insurance policy and list me as the sole beneficiary. What about your parents? What about me? Why am I not listed on there? But why is your spouse listed on there as the sole beneficiary? It's very fishy. And like you said too, your boss, if I ever started a job and someone's hey, you got to take out life insurance and then put me as the sole beneficiary, I'm not gonna ever work there. let alone stay there. If, I'm trying to like stay the night at this, sort of like motel, hotel situation, that's just ridiculous. And somehow this piece of shit got away with it. At this point, it should be no surprise to hear that soon many people began to disappear. It was even reported by some in the neighborhood that they would see women enter the castle but would never see them leave. In 1892, Holmes would add a third floor to the castle, hoping to use it as a means of running the castle as a hotel during the World's Columbian Exposition the following year in 1893. And up until then, many more would continue to disappear. 1893 came, and Holmes saw this as the perfect opportunity to capitalize off of the more than 27 million people that attended the World's Exposition, also known as the Chicago World's Fair. He even marketed his hotel as the World's Fair Hotel, given the fact that it was roughly like less than 5 miles away from where the events were going on. And the fair would actually run from like May 1st all the way through October 30th, which, as we know, just before Halloween. Keeping in character, he mainly targeted his hotel towards women visiting Chicago for the World's Fair. And once again, these women would never be seen again. This went on all throughout the time the World's Fair was in Chicago. When I say that these women were never seen again, I'm sure we all know what that means. But for those of you that may be confused, it is believed that Holmes was luring a countless number of victims into his hotel where they would sadly meet their end. Considering the sheer number of people in the city at the time, it is not hard to believe that he was able to get away with this. He would not stay in Chicago much longer, as he soon was on the run fleeing prosecution for arson after the third floor of his castle caught fire. And I'm glad to say that Holmes's reign of terror soon came to an end. In 1894, a scorned former cellmate by the name of Marion Hedgepeth told authorities about a life insurance scheme Holmes had concocted while in prison with him in St. Louis, Missouri. In said scam, Holmes would take out a life insurance policy out on himself and fake his own death, where he would then attempt to collect payment and pay Hedgepeth $500 in return for the name of a trusted attorney.
So he would fake his own death?
Yeah, so in this plan that he was hatching with this cellmate that he was with in Missouri, he, kind of told him like, hey, if you give me the name of a really good attorney, because this dude, right, Marion Hedgepeth, he was also like a career criminal. Like he had been doing this sort of like same things that Holmes was known for doing. So he said, if you give me the name of a good attorney that I can use, I'll give you $500 in return once I collect this life insurance payout.
So he would pay the guy $500 just for giving him the name for a good attorney?
Yeah, so it was kind of just like, hey, if you help me out with this, I'll help you out, with some money, basically.
Oh, okay.
And by all accounts, he did just that, right? So this guy was under the impression that he cut him out of a deal and he was angry at him, but he actually did try to do this. But things went south when the life insurance company thought something was off and refused to pay him. And like I said, Hedgepeth had been under the impression that Holmes had cut him out of the life insurance scheme. And to some extent, that was actually true. Because Holmes planned to commit a similar scheme with his friend that went by the name of Benjamin Pitezel. Only this time, he murdered his friend and was able to collect the payment. This was enough for authorities, and soon the search for the ever-elusive H.H. Holmes was on. Finally, in November of 1894, he was arrested in Boston, Massachusetts, on suspicion of fraud. Initially, authorities believed him to be nothing but a serial fraudster, but that was until his story began to change and change and change. He admitted to killing 27 people, though he would go on to later increase that number to over 100.
What the heck?
And today, it is even said that the real number is somewhere in the near 200s. He was ultimately convicted of the murder of his friend Benjamin, which I talked about just a second ago. He was confessing to these murders, right? And he confessed to 27. The number is kind of off there, but it's either 27 or 28 murders.
So was he only convicted for his friend's murder, or did they also get him for the ones he confessed to?
Right, so that's what I was going to get at right now, right? He confessed to these murders, right? 27 of them, 28 of them, whichever one, depending on like the article you look at, the number kind of fluctuates. But he was only ever convicted of the murder of his friend. And actually, what he did in this scheme, he concocted with his friend, right? He convinced his friend to take out the life insurance policy. So in the one where he was taking it out with Marion Hedgepeth, he told him that he would take it out himself. Where when things went south, he met with his friend and said, "Hey, you know what? I have this plan, but you need to take out a life insurance policy." He was going to pose as a sort of inventor, and the plan is that he was going to fake his own death by kind of showing that there was like an explosion in like a laboratory. And what actually happened, as I mentioned, is that Holmes killed him. And because he had the actual body, like his friend's actual body, they gave him the money. And what he did is he went to this guy's wife, kind of told him like, "Hey, here's this money for your friend, but I know you have 5 kids. I'm gonna kill 3 of them." And he did exactly that.
He told her he was gonna kill them.
Yes, and he did that in a way of like silencing her. And throughout this time, once he got like arrested and all this, they were able to find not only, they found the body of his friend, they actually found like some of the remains of his children, and they were able to tie that back to him, and he got convicted of these, right? But other than that, they didn't find anything else tying him to these other murders, these other 27 to 200 murders that people believe him to have actually committed.
That's insane. To me, it's insane to learn that he convinced so many people to take out life insurance with him, listed. Like, to me, I don't know how convincing this guy was. Obviously, he was pretty convincing. Must have told him like, "Oh, you'll get some money too, like I swear." But I don't know. But then also, like, it's insane that he straight up told that guy's wife like, "I'm gonna kill your kids," and he ended up doing so as well. Like,
yeah, it was more of like a threat, it wasn't like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this, okay? Like, is it okay with you?" Like, no, It wasn't, it wasn't like that. It was more like, "I'm gonna kill your kids." And, I was, because of this, because he wanted to silence her, right? And I guess it worked until this guy, never make a deal with somebody and then like, just basically like tie him out of it, because this is what backfired on him. This is really like the sole reason that the authorities really were on his trail, because he had been on the run for a very long time. And for multiple things, right? So the reason why, like I said, I know I didn't mention this in my initial research of Holmes, because this isn't necessarily a true crime case that like I'm covering. It's more of like, it has true crime aspects, but it's more paranormal is what I want to get into, right? That's for like another podcast. I'm sure there's plenty of podcasts, YouTube videos that you guys can look at if you want the exact full story. But the reason why he ended up going to Chicago was because he was fleeing a debt that he had back in after he graduated from medical school. He actually moved around in like multiple different cities, and he was fleeing that debt from those different cities, and he ended up being in Chicago, where he thought, "You know what, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm a doctor now. I graduated." And that's when he went by the name of H.H. Holmes. So all this, just end up saying that on May 7th, 1896, the man said to be America's first serial killer was hung. But he didn't die instantly. Instead, he slowly strangled to death for about 15 minutes before officially being pronounced dead. Which, honestly, he deserved it, right? He deserves much worse, but what can we do?
He deserves some form of suffering, but...
Exactly. And hey, 15 minutes of just thinking, like, when is this going to end? He got what he deserved. I'm sure people would have wanted more, but what can we do? And ironically enough, Holmes requested to be buried 10 feet deep in a cement-contained coffin in fear of grave robbers. And guess what? They actually listened to him.
Really?
Yes. And so, like, can we talk about that for a second?
Why'd they listen to him, though? Like,
that's exactly my point. The man that just messed with bodies and animal bodies and, doing all these different... The reason why he was using all these different, like, bodies in, I guess, like, even in medical school, he was known for, like, stealing corpses and then like doing insurance fraud with it, claiming that like, oh, this was a loved one that died, life insurance scheme, life insurance scheme, life insurance scheme, over and over and over again, which many believe is exactly what he was doing at this point. It is even believed that he was selling these corpses of these people that he was killing, mainly women, right? He was only wanting women to work there, targeting the women to stay there in the hotel. He was selling their like body parts to medical students so that they could perform, whatever research and like studies that they wanted to do. So he was really in for it, not only just for the money, but like for his own weird, whatever, like fucked up thing he was going on in his head, that he like thought this was so fun, to just kind of like play with people as if they were toys. But all that being said, this man that went ahead and did this for years was scared that somebody may dig up his body.
I mean, I'm sure he knows how, like, with his fucked up mind, like, he knew what he did to dead bodies, basically. He could only imagine what someone would want to do to his.
Yeah, and I think it's only right, like if someone did wanted to do that, like, let him. I mean, he did this to so many people for so long, but like it just goes to show like how much of a coward and, a hypocrite he was. Like he didn't want that happening to him.
Exactly.
And I mean, this guy is just terrible. And I'm going to get into exactly, what he did and I guess why he wanted to do this and how he did this. So, as I said, right, we're talking about all these different things that he did throughout his life. And I mean, in Chicago mainly is where he operated this huge scheme. But just how was one man able to get away with murdering countless individuals without ever raising suspicion? Because like I said, people would notice that these women would go into the castle, right, the so-called castle, and never leave. So this was like a known thing. People did realize this, but nothing ever came of it until after the fact. It took somebody, being angry at him for like cheating him out of a deal for them to finally go after him. And it wasn't even for murder, it was for fraud. Well, remember when I said that during construction of the castle, he would hire and fire different construction crews?
Yes.
See, he didn't just do this to get out of paying for the job. He did this to ensure that no one would have any idea as to what he was actually planning. So, what was he planning? Once construction had been completed, the so-called hotel was equipped with soundproof rooms, peepholes, trap doors, stairs and doors that led to nothing, secret passages, and body chutes.
What the heck?
Trust me, it keeps going and it gets worse. Some rooms even had gas lines that ran into them in order to asphyxiate anybody inside. The castle's basement contained its very own crematorium, surgical tools and table, torture devices, and many other things Holmes's twisted mind thought were necessary for his own pleasure. Holmes is thought to have used these tools to conduct his own sort of research, stripping some bodies down to their bones. Authorities will go on to find different remains of his victims, ranging from the bones or blood-stained clothing to pieces of hair. And as the news broke of the atrocities that were committed at this hotel, a new name stuck: Murder Castle. And I mean, I think this is very fitting, right? The things that this man would do are just like horrendous. Like, you can get into like the nitty-gritty details, like the stuff that he was doing like is sick. And like I said, we are not a true crime podcast, so I won't really get into too much of those things. And his victims, I mean, like the people that I mentioned, that his friend Benjamin and his children, these were only some of the many, many victims that he had. All of these countless women that were just, never seen again, who the authorities found like whatever little scraps and remains they could find. I mean, as sad as it is, it's the truth, right? This guy was so twisted and just did this for fun. But all this brings us to today. The infamous Murder Castle no longer stands. And I know earlier I said that he fled Chicago, fleeing like prosecution for arson, but it is also believed that These two unidentified men may have also set the fire, but nonetheless, Holmes decided to flee at this point. The building was later rebuilt and it stood until it was torn down in 1938. And today, the Inglewood branch of the US Post Office stands in its place. And as we all know, like you mentioned earlier, right, when you were talking about the Stanley Hotel, most places that have been like the sites of atrocities such as those committed by the man dubbed the Devil in the White City are bound to be hotspots of otherworldly activity. Of course, the post office that now stands where the murder castle once did is no exception. It is reported that the basement of the post office is the most eerie, with many reporting hearing unexplained noises and seeing shadow figures. On top of this, it is said that the building itself emanates both a negative energy and intense feelings of anxiety. According to frightfind.com, one postal worker was walking through a hallway while trying to find the source of a weird noise, where all she found was an empty hallway lined with foldable chairs. She then returned back to the lobby and then later returned back to the same hallway, only to find that all the chairs had mysteriously stacked themselves. Postal workers have also claimed to have seen the apparition of a woman in the building and outside in the courtyard. The paranormal events don't stop there though. Those visiting the post office have claimed to have heard the ominous sound of a woman humming or singing in vacant areas of the building. Others report hearing screams as they pass by. And it is even said that dogs will appear to be unnerved when passing by as well. You know, what do you make about all these like paranormal experiences that people have, been quoted with experiencing and also just like witnessing in general?
To me, it makes sense considering the history of just like what happened in that area, all the murders he supposedly did. Not even supposedly, like that he did. All the women that went missing, just everything. To me, it makes sense. The energy there must be so heavy, knowing what might have happened or truly happened in that area. You said that they've heard screams and they've heard like just women voices like all around. Like to me, that makes sense and like that's creepy to know.
Yeah, like this, I mean, I will admit, right? When I first heard about the murder castle, this was like I was in middle school. I didn't know anything about this supposed like paranormal happenings. I didn't hear about this until recently when I was researching for our episode that it actually did have some sort of like paranormal aspects to it. Where for the most part, this story is a true crime story, right? It is like horrendous what he did, and he deserves to be dead, right? I mean, he was deserved to be hung and executed, yes, but like these people that went through these things, like it's just unbearable. And I mean, my heart goes out to these people, right? And to think that there's like a woman apparition when we know that like he mainly targeted women, it's just so sad. And like to hear that scream, you can only think that maybe this is a person that's kind of like reliving the same moment, just kind of trapped in this like eternal hell, just being in the same place where this man committed all these things. And I just got to point out, the basement of this post office is said to be like the very same basement of the murder castle, which is where he tend to operate, right? I said that it had body chutes and trapdoors. All that stuff would lead to the basement where he had his surgical table, his crematorium, all those sorts of things. I think it's no surprise that this area is probably like, the hotspot for whatever goes on here.
The energy just must be so tough in that area since, that is where most likely people ended up having their final moments in. And it's sad to think of. And it's just horrible what he did.
So I know your story had an aspect with like a dog as well, and this one does in a way where people say that when they pass by with their dogs, they are just visibly like shaken, like they are visibly uncomfortable. And we've talked about in the past about animals, specifically dogs, right? They are very keen to these supernatural things. Like they are able to see things that we may not see. So it is weird too when people like say stuff like that. It kind of just gives more credence to it. back to the Overton Bridge where they began to act weird around the bridge. You had these animals acting weird around this building where these atrocities happen, where it's said to be, apparitions and hearing these things. And supposedly, I seen a YouTube video where I guess I didn't see this anywhere else other than this YouTube video, which is why I didn't really mention it in here, but people will go into the post office. It's a post office, right? It's not like a museum. You can't go in and like tour it or whatever, but people will still go in. People are curious and they report feeling like touched or, whispers and those sorts of things. Like, I guess what you would experience like in any place that is said to be haunted. So I believe there's definitely something there. I mean, just given all these horrendous things that happened, it's kind of hard to believe that something isn't going on there.
I know one thing that I was thinking about, since like this has been changed into like a post office, if we are thinking of like kind of how like spirits are, if they are able to see like our world and they're reliving our moments, like I could imagine how horrible and trippy it would be. Like you were killed in like this hotel and everything like that, and then these people are just kind of running their lives and just doing their business, at a post office. Like it must feel just horrible to just keep reliving your life while these people are just trying to run their business. And I can imagine them just like screaming for help, like, can't you see I'm in horrible pain, like help me.
Just kind of just stuck, I guess, stuck in this loop. Yeah, I mean, in both stories, I mean, in this one and yours, you have workers who are still doing their jobs even in the afterlife. Like it's interesting how we have these different, like, similar but different parallels, right? So we have people repeating the same agonizing thing when other people are just repeating their daily lives, and then in other cases we have spirits who are aware of what's going on and aware that things aren't how they used to be, and they're just adjusting to whatever the circumstances are. In this case, it's a post office now. We can have an apparition messing with people in the post office. This case, like I said, it has always stuck with me since all the way since I can remember, like middle school, hearing about it for the first time. It's sad, really. It's really sad. And I mean, there's a quote that H.H. Holmes went on to say, after he was arrested, he was like, this was like all over the news. There's many different newspaper clippings. All these things we'll include in our Instagram at calaveriapod. You guys can check out the hotel. I mean, both hotels in this case, H.H. Holmes himself, all this. But I'm not going to give the exact quote because I'm not going to give this guy any, this notoriety that he may have been looking for, because once you hear the gist of this, you're going to think like, really? This guy's an asshole. So he said something along the lines of like the devil, like he was born with the devil inside him, and that he said that like he couldn't like help it, he couldn't help the fact that he killed all these people. And he akin this to being like, along the lines of like, you don't blame a poet for making, poetry, or you don't blame a genius for being great. He says stuff along those lines. So he's like, you can't blame him for being a murderer when he has the devil inside him. So like he was kind of made to do this. I just thought like that's like the most arrogant piece of shit thing that he could have said.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like I rolled my eyes as soon as he said that. I was like, is this guy for real?
Oh yeah, and trust me, he was. In one account I seen, or in one of these reports, I guess he sold his story to some agency or whatever for a couple $1,000s. So I mean, I mean, to the very end, I guess this was a game to him. He was thinking making money, and then it's even said that at his hanging, he didn't look like shaken or disturbed by this at all. It was just kind of like he just knew what was going to happen. I think the only thing we could really do now is remember these people who were subject to this terrible, terrible, like horrific treatment by this man. And it's sad, I know we are a paranormal podcast. That's what we want to hear, these paranormal things. And a lot of times the paranormal does have like that intersection with true crime, and it has these very sad stories. But I mean, it has to be shared. It's important that we recognize our history. This is American history. This is world history. So, yeah. With that, I'd like to end off by thanking my sources. And in this case, I have quite a bit of sources, so I'll try to get through this as fast as possible. Thank you to crimemuseum.org for their entry on H.H. Holmes. Thank you to legendsofamerica.com for their article H.H. Holmes and the Murder Castle of Chicago, written by Kathy Alexander and updated in May 2020. Thank you to Forensic Scholars Today for their publication H.H. Holmes, one of America's first recorded serial killers, written by Gerard Brown, Eric Hickey, and Blake Harris in 2015. Thank you to Britannica.com for the biography on H.H. Holmes, written by John Philip Jenkins and updated on May 3rd, 2023. Thank you to Biography.com for the biography on H.H. Holmes, written by the editors of Biography.com on April 3rd, 2014, and updated on May 26, 2021. Thank you to SmithsonianMag.com for their article, The Enduring Mystery of H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer, written by Maylin Sully on May 7th, 2021. Thank you to the United States Census Bureau for the history of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Thank you to History.com for the entry on the Murder Castle, written by the editors of History.com on July 13th, 2017, and updated on January 23rd, 2020. Thank you to CBSNews.com for their article, Chicago Hauntings, the Story of H.H. Holmes, Murder Castle, and Sightings in the Basement of the Inglewood Post Office, Standing in Its Place, written by Adam Harrington on October 30th, 2021. And finally, thank you to FrightFind.com for their entry, the H.H. Holmes Murder Castle. So, yeah, we had 2 cases for you guys. One pretty heavy one, and the other, I guess the more lighthearted side. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and you already know what time it is. We're not going to leave you guys on that note. We're going to leave you guys with something to talk about. And today, Samantha has a TikTok to talk about, so why don't you tell us what happened?
So I saw this TikTok one night and I was like, we have to cover it in our podcast because the imagery and everything, it's just scary, honestly. So in this podcast, we see like a family playing with like this younger girl, like probably someone's daughter, someone's niece, and she's on a swing and they're swinging her and they're having fun, but it's late at night and they're like in a forest kind of setting. And in the background while they're playing, you kind of see like this weird gray creature kind of just in the background watching them and just going down on its, like not on its knees, but like kind of just bending down and staring at them.
Right, like observing them.
And throughout the video, it kind of changes its positions as if it's like uncomfortable and like it kind of looks like unhuman-like, but also very human-like, like humanoid, I would say. And at the end, it just walks away. And this family does not acknowledge it at all, is one of the main things I would like to say. They record this interaction of like them playing with the girl and everything like that, and they're happy and they're laughing, and they just don't react to this creature in the background, and it's creepy to see. So what was your first thoughts when I sent you this?
Okay, first thing, completely honest here, when I seen this, the first thing I thought of was, this is a perfect account name. Like, the person that posted this TikTok account has probably one of the best names ever. It's El Cucuy TV. I just thought that's so fitting. So I mean, you can only imagine, they have all these sorts of scary videos. But once I got over that, I watched the video. One thing that immediately kind of caught my attention was, Samantha said, it's like a humanoid, but not quite human-like, right? It has the characteristics of a human, right? It's bipedal. It stands up like us. It has long arms, But it is very gray and pale. And immediately, I thought of the Rake.
That's what I thought of as well.
Immediately, it reminded me of the Rake. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's what I saw, because this thing looks pretty tall and it's in the background, like Samantha said. It's changing its position. It just kind of seems like it may have been disturbed by the people being there, why are you guys in my home, right? Or whatever. Because it is a weird little area to have, I guess, a playground or a swing. It's near the woods or whatever. But I thought it was very off-putting. It's something so eerie about, these people enjoying themselves, having a great time, and then this thing just lurking in the background and them not even knowing.
Exactly. And I also thought it was pretty funny because, looking at the comments, people were like, oh, he just wants to swing too.
He's waiting for his
Yeah,
turn.
he's waiting for his turn. People were just like, people on TikTok, they make their jokes. Someone saying, like, oh, that's just my friend looking for his vape. Like, chill out. And I thought that was pretty funny. But, like, it's just scary to think. And people were also like calling out the family as well. Like, this is why we do not play at night. Like, this is why we do not go outside and do this.
I guess if you're like in a well lit area, maybe your backyard, maybe something, okay, but late at night near the woods, I don't know about that. I'm
I
all for
personally
people
wouldn't do
enjoying
it.
themselves. Yeah, neither would I. Definitely not. But yeah, I mean, let us know what you guys think about this. Like, what does it look like to you? Samantha and I both agree on the fact that like this looks like the rake. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, probably check out our episode on the rake where we have photos of what this thing looks like, this cryptid, right? And speaking of photos, you guys can check out any of our Instagram posts that we do for each episode. And that's going to be on Instagram, like I said, at calaveriapod. And be sure to follow us on TikTok as well, at calaveriapod.
If you guys have any stories you guys would like to hear on the podcast, or anything interesting you guys would like us to cover on the podcast, feel free to send that in at our email at calaveriapod@gmail.com.
And don't forget to rate us and leave a review on any podcasting app that you guys are listening on. 5 stars reviews, preferably, please. That helps us get out there to everybody else. And don't forget to share us with your friends and family. It helps us grow, right? And that's what we want this next year. I mean, I'm setting a goal for us. We want to get more followers, listeners, whatever the case may be, because we love sharing this with everybody. And it just encourages more and more to get this stuff out to you guys. But if there's nothing else, Samantha, I think that's it for us. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Bye.